Hey everyone, John Gaylor here. I wanted to kind of do an intro to this video. I handmade my first Indiana Jones fedora, and here it is. Check it out. So I met a guy from my church, and I'll put a picture of the hat that he had made, and I had to try it on my head, and I took a picture of it. It looked kind of big for my head, but I was completely inspired that he told me that he made that hat, and I was thinking, that's possible? You can make a hat like that? Quick background, I've been an Indiana Jones fan since Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came out. That was when I discovered the first three movies. And then obviously since Dial of Destiny came out, it's just been an awesome wrap up. He showed me that hat and I was just blown away. I was like, wow, okay, I have got to try this. So that night I made the decision that I'm gonna try it myself. So I ordered all the material. So I decided to go with wool felt just to see if I could do it, see if it was something I would enjoy the process of doing. About the hat, I was actually going for the Raiders look. The specific scene when he's grabbing the idol, this right here, that right there, switching the sand to grab the idol, putting it back on his head, turning around, disaster. That was kind of what I was going for with the tight pinch up here. The brim is starting to look more like the Cairo scene because every time I put it on, I don't know if you can notice, but the point keeps not lining up with the front of my face, so it's almost like I'm giving myself that Raiders turn, but not with the pinch in the front. Anyways, so it's like a mix of the idol scene and the Cairo scene, really, which to me is an awesome blend. I love it. I love this hat. So on here it might look like it's black. It's really not. It's chocolate brown. The ribbon is the seal brown, I think it was. And then as far as the inside, I messed up the sweatband. This was the only one I had, so I cut it. I put it in the hat after I was done shaping it, then cut it. I didn't think about it fitting my head first because honestly it's a little bit tight on my head, which is what I wanted, but I didn't account for it being as tight as it is, which is all right. I'm glad because then won't come off my head too much, but it's more comfortably worn on my head like that, kind of back a little. That's more chill to me. It looks pretty cool still. Anyways, yeah, did that little bow out of the leftover of the ribbon. The inner lining is just satin white silk fabric. That's it for the inside. Really like how it turned out, except for those two stitches there. I had to grab the rest of the sweatband and sew it back on there. So I kind of had to work that out. I didn't want to have to wait for another sweatband. I wanted to finish this thing because I was ready to see it done. I got the bow there with that little accent there too. Got that from a guy from YouTube. Yeah, that's the hat, and I love it. Without further ado, here is the process of how I made my first Indiana Jones fedora. So the first thing I did was I went to Hobby Lobby and bought this 9-inch foam ball, and I used a kitchen knife to carve it down to a hat block that would be my size for my head. And I grabbed the felt and I held it over some steam. I used a big pot so that all the fibers could get nice and loosened up and stretched out to get it ready to stretch it over the foam hat block I made. Once it got loosened up, I was ready to stretch it over my hat block. I went back and forth on this process a couple of times right here, trying to get it stretched out, and I figured out real quick that it'd be a whole lot easier and faster if I just set up my towel there on the counter and just dropped the whole thing into the pot, into that strainer I had, so that it could keep stretching over the foam. Once I was happy with how flat the brim turned out to be, I set it off to the side. You're supposed to set it like that for about 48 hours to a week. I left mine there, I think, for 3 days. Then it was time to mark the brim to cut it, but I realized really quick that number 2 lead pencil on brown felt does not show up very well, so it was really hard to see where to cut. And of course, all I had was scissors. There are hat makers who have an awesome tool for that, but I don't have one of those. So at this point, I'm so excited to finally get this thing off of the block just to see if it holds its shape. And it did. And I was happy. And I could not resist. I had to stick it on my head just to see if it fit. And it totally did. Now, when it came to forming the crown, it was a whole lot easier than I thought it would be. And I was totally happy and impressed with how easy it was to form the crown and get that pinch there and then get that straight dent on the top. It just worked out so well. So I put it back on the hat block, and then I got the sandpaper and just kind of went to town sanding on it, trying to get it smoothed out. I've seen hat makers set their hats on fire. I thought about it, looked into it, but I just was not brave enough to burn it all up and just totally mess it up. I didn't want to risk it, so I just stuck to sanding it until it was kind of smoothed out. So it was at this point that I really did notice how floppy the brim was still. So this is my attempt to try to stiffen it up some, just so that whenever I go to shape it, it would actually stay put. But little did I know, it was definitely not going to work. But I tried, put some steam on it, put the iron back on it, and just went back and forth on it. And I noticed it because every time I put it on my head, it just would flop, and it wouldn't flop the right way. So I figured I would do some more adjusting on the brim. And to be quite honest, the brim dimensions on the original Raiders hat, I believe, is 2 5/8, I think, on the sides, and 2 3/4 on the front and back, I think it was. It was really hard to get those measurements. So I just went ahead and measured all the way around, I think around 2.5. Kind of gives it more of a crusade look with that shorter brim, but I just went ahead and went for it just to see if it'd be easier to form the brim. After that, I finally started sewing in the sweatband, and like I said at the intro, I did mess it up, so I had to restitch it and make it a little longer, and then I was able to get it all sewn in there. And then here I am actually just now finishing up the ribbon. Here's the lining. I just did it as simple as I possibly could. Kind of looks like an old McDonald's hat or something, but I just stitched it together with some fabric, that satin white, and lined up the back of the stitching with the back of the hat. And a guy on YouTube I watched said that he doesn't ever glue or sew in his liners because if they get dirty, you can take them out and wash them. So I definitely decided to do that. Basically, the sweatband holds in the liner and hasn't fallen out since I've been wearing it. Once I got the lining in, I was pretty much done with this hat, and I was so excited, so happy with how it looks. I mean, just holding it up right here, I was just totally blown away that it looked this good. I couldn't believe it. The crown looked amazing, so I had to do more work to the brim to get it all, just make the whole hat look good. So after a while of wearing the hat and trying it on, I realized the brim was not staying the way it was supposed to. So I used some starch spray, some steam, and my iron, and I just did some more work on it, just back and forth, trying to see if I could get the brim to cooperate. It was really, really tough. The hardest challenge of the whole process of making this hat. I figured the sewing would be the hardest, but it was actually the brim. Here I decided to go ahead and go with the tight pinch. I wasn't going to go with the tight pinch because I wasn't sure what this hat was going to look like when I was making it. But when it got to this point, I really wanted the hat to keep its shape all the way around, so I went ahead and did the tight pinch there, and that's what made me want to make it look like the Raiders of the Lost Ark version. Well, all right, I hope that y'all enjoyed that. I just made clips of me making the hat because it was my first go around, and I didn't want to talk and show what I was doing because I didn't really know what I was doing.
Oh, I don't know. I'm making this up as I go.
I was just doing everything based off of what I'd seen from YouTube, from other hat makers that I watched, and went down that rabbit hole. So ever since I had officially finished the hat, I had a lot of trouble with the brim, like more trouble than I thought I would have. So I ended up just reaching out and asking my friend, like, what can I do to get this brim right? He suggested some starch spray. I went and bought some and sprayed it on there, ironed it as much as I could, and it worked a little, but it was still trying to droop, and it would droop like that, and I'd end up looking more like the scene where he jumps in Raiders of the Lost Ark when he jumps into the water. That's kind of what it was starting to look like, more like it looked like it was like how the brim just all, because the hat is soaking wet. Yeah, I could not figure out how to get it to look right. I ironed, and I even had, at one point, I had taken my hat and I had set it right here on my dresser between two boxes, smushed it together to where the brim folded down, and left it like that all night. Got it the next day, put it on my head. It worked fine for a while, but it was still trying to droop on this side, and I was like, oh, what can I do to get that to stay? I actually told my wife about it, and she was like, well, what are you trying to do? I'm like, I'm trying to get these sides right here to do that. And she's like, well, why don't you just iron it right there? So I did that, folded it down, ironed over it, sprayed it with starch, some more starch, and ever since it has stayed up and it doesn't go back down, and it's awesome, and I'm so happy about that. The only thing is the starch was a learning process because, as you can see, it really did a number on the brim, which I don't mind too much because it gives it some character, and it was an adventure to make the hat. So that's my video of this first hat. I definitely plan to do another one, so stay tuned for that video, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching.